Welcome to FinTalk podcast series. Today, we're going to dig into a practice that's, well, it's happening all around us online, often completely under the radar. We're talking about surveillance pricing. You might also hear it called personalized pricing or algorithmic pricing.
That's right. And the core idea is pretty straightforward, really. Companies use your personal information. Think about things like your location, the device you're browsing on, your search history, maybe even guesses about your income to decide the specific price you see.
So it's not just the old supply and demand or, rush hour surge pricing.
Not entirely, no. While those factors still exist, this adds another layer. It's about how much the system thinks you, specifically, might be willing to pay based on your digital footprint.
Okay, so maybe that explains those weird moments, right? Like you look up a flight, you think about it, you go back an hour later, and suddenly the price has jumped up quite a bit.
Exactly. Or, you're sitting next to a friend, literally side by side, looking at the same hotel room online.
And they get a lower price on their phone. Yeah, I've heard of that.
hmm Well, that might not just be a random glitch. That could very well be surveillance pricing in action. The system is showing different prices based on your individual profiles.
Okay, so it's deliberate.
Often, yes. So, our goal in this deep dive is to really unpack this. What exactly is surveillance pricing? How do these algorithms work? Where is it actually being used? What are the rules around it, if any? And importantly, what can you maybe do about it?
All right, let's start with nailing down that definition again. Surveillance pricing means the price adjusts based specifically on data collected about me or you as an individual.
Precisely. And it's that reliance on personal data that's the key difference from, say, standard dynamic pricing. Dynamic pricing reacts to general market stuff, time, demand, inventory. Surveillance pricing reacts to who you are online.
And what sort of data are we talking about here? What makes my price potentially different?
Oh, it's quite a list. Your physical location is a big one. Are you shopping from an area considered wealthy? That could influence the price. And unfortunately, this can sometimes lead to discriminatory outcomes based on assumptions tied to geography.
Wow, okay.
What else? The device you're using. Maybe an expensive new smartphone versus an older model suggests different spending habits to the algorithm. Your browsing history is huge, looking at the same product over and over.
Signals strong interest, right?
You got it. High interest, maybe urgency. Past purchases matter too. Are you a loyal customer? Do you usually go for the premium options? Even just being logged into an account can feed the system data.
A lot of information just to show me a price tag.
It really is. And all this data gets crunched by algorithms designed to predict your price sensitivity. Basically, how much they think you will tolerate paying before walking away.
So if I look like someone who doesn't compare prices much.
You might get shown a higher price, yeah.
Hmm.
The algorithm flags you as less price sensitive.
And this is where it gets really dicey, isn't it? The
Yep.
lack of transparency. It's not like there's a label saying you're paying 10% more because you live here.
Exactly. You usually have no idea it's even happening. There's no easy way to check what price someone else is seeing at the exact same moment for the exact same thing. It's not like a public sale or a coupon code everyone knows about.
That hidden aspect feels, well, different. Unfair, maybe.
That's the heart of the controversy for many people, yes.
Okay, so we know what it is.
Yeah.
How does it actually work under the hood? What's the mechanism?
Well, from an economic perspective, the ultimate goal is something called first-degree price discrimination, which is basically the seller's dream scenario.
Their dreams.
Charging every single customer the absolute maximum price they'd be willing to pay for something.
Yeah.
Maximize profit from each individual.
So the algorithm is constantly trying to figure out my personal spending limit for that item.
In essence, yes.
Yeah.
It uses real-time data analysis. As you browse, as you interact, your profile is being updated, and the price shown to you can adjust accordingly, sometimes instantly.
And technically, how are they gathering all this data?
A few key ways. Online, you've got cookies, of course, especially third-party ones that track you across sites. But it's getting more sophisticated. Browser fingerprinting is a big one.
Fingerprinting, what's that?
It's where they gather tiny details about your browser setup, your plugins, screen size, fonts, things like that, to create a unique ID for your device. It can track you even if you block cookies.
Huh, sneaky.
Mobile apps are also huge data sources. They often have broader permissions to access location, device info, and send it straight back to the company. Loyalty programs obviously link your online and offline shopping, and your social media activity, your search history, especially if you're logged into Google or whatever, it all paints a picture.
Okay, give me a practical example. How might my search history change a price?
Well, think about a big online retailer like Amazon. If you're logged in and you keep visiting the page for a specific, say, high-end gadget over several days, but you don't buy it.
The system figures I really want it.
Exactly. It might infer high interest. Maybe you're just waiting for a payday or something. So the next time you visit, it might nudge the price up just slightly for you, figuring you're probably committed enough now to pay a little extra.
Wow, it really feels like being constantly tested.
It can feel that way.
So where are we actually seeing this kind of thing happen? Any specific examples?
Oh, yeah, there are documented cases. Target, for instance, actually paid a multi-million-dollar penalty related to its mobile app. The issue was the app allegedly showed higher prices to shoppers when it detected they were physically in the store's parking lot.
Wait, higher prices because you were closer.
The assumption seemed to be that if you're already there, your willingness to pay is higher. You're kind of committed.
That is kind of wild.
It definitely makes you think. Amazon's prices are famously fluid, changing millions of times a day, partly driven by algorithms responding to user behavior and other factors. Staples, the office supply store, also got called out for showing different prices on its website based on your location. Reports suggested they charged more if their system estimated you were in an area with fewer physical competitors nearby.
Ah, so if they think you don't have many local options, they charge you more online.
That was the finding, yes. Ride-hailing apps like Uber and Lyft openly say they use factors beyond just distance and time. Things like neighborhood patterns, time of day, inferred trip purpose play into the price.
Right, we know about surge pricing, but this sounds like more.
It can be. There were even accusations, for example, that Uber's system might increase fares for users whose phone battery was running low.
No way, because you're desperate.
Potentially leveraging that vulnerability, yeah. The idea being you're less likely to wait or shop around if your phone's about to die.
That feels particularly opportunistic.
It certainly raises eyebrows. And remember, Orbitz, the travel site, they were found years ago to be steering Mac users towards more expensive hotel listings.
Just because they were using a Mac.
Based on data suggesting Mac users, on average, tended to spend a bit more on hotels. So the algorithm subtly nudged them towards pricier options first.
Wow, so they're making assumptions based on my operating system. Really shows how many signals they're reading.
Definitely.
Okay, with all these examples, what's the deal with the rules? Is this legal? Is anyone regulating it, say, in the U.S. compared to other places?
That's where things get pretty fragmented, especially in the U.S. At the federal level, there's no single law specifically targeting surveillance pricing based on personal data.
So nothing like the EU's big privacy law.
Not yet, no. Companies mostly operate under existing consumer protection laws against deception or discrimination, but there isn't something tailor-made for this specific type of algorithmic pricing.
Has there been any movement, any talk from regulators?
There has been some noise. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, signaled back in 2022 that they were looking into these kinds of dark patterns and algorithmic discrimination, and the Biden administration put out a report calling for action. But, regulatory focus can shift, and federal legislation is slow.
Right, so if the federal government is slow, are states doing anything?
Yes, absolutely. That's where a lot of the action is. States like California, Colorado, New York, Illinois, Georgia, they've all introduced or considered bills related to data privacy and algorithmic fairness that touch on this.
Any speed outs?
California is definitely one to watch. They passed a bill, AB 446, through their state assembly in May 2025. California often sets the trend for the rest of the U.S. on tech regulation. Think about their main privacy law, the CCPA. So this bill could be influential.
What's the goal of that California bill?
The bill's author describes surveillance pricing practices as predatory and discriminatory, aiming to tackle how consumers are unwittingly exploited. So it's looking at transparency, maybe restrictions, but of course there's pushback from industry groups who argue it could stifle innovation or be too burdensome.
Okay, so a battleground at the state level. How does this compare internationally? You mentioned the EU.
Right. The European Union is quite different because of the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. It's a very strong privacy law. While it doesn't explicitly ban personalized pricing, it puts really strict limits on collecting and using personal data for automated decisions, which includes pricing.
What kind of limits?
Key things under GDPR are the right for consumers to be informed about how their data is used, the right to object to being profiled or subjected to automated decisions, and often companies need your explicit consent before using your data for these kinds of pricing tactics.
So much harder to just do it secretly.
Much harder to do it opaquely in Europe, yes. Companies tend to be more cautious, maybe stick to more standardized pricing, or at least be clear about what they're doing if they personalize.
And the UK.
Post-Brexit, the UK has its own version, UK GDPR, which is very similar. Their competition authority, the CMA, has also voiced concerns about algorithms causing harm, including discriminatory pricing.
What about Canada?
Canada is also moving in that direction. They have proposed legislation like the Consumer Privacy Protection Act, aiming for more transparency and consumer control over data as part of a broader digital charter initiative. So you definitely see a global trend towards trying to get a handle on this.
Okay, so a growing awareness globally, but the rules are still kind of a patchwork, especially in the US. Given all that and how subtle this can be, is there anything I, as a regular person can actually do to try and limit my exposure to this?
It's definitely challenging to avoid completely, especially with mobile apps grabbing so much data. But yes, there are steps you can take to reduce the amount of data you're feeding these systems.
Okay, lay them on me. What works?
Well, first, if it's a significant purchase, try using a web browser on a computer rather than the company's mobile app.
Why is that?
Apps generally have more permissions and send a lot more granular data directly back to the developers compared to what a website can typically gather through a browser, especially a privacy-focused browser.
Okay, browser over app for big buys. Got it. What else?
Manage your cookies. Specifically, block third-party cookies in your browser settings. These are the ones designed to follow you from site to site, building that profile used for targeted ads and potentially personalized pricing. Blocking them cuts off a major data stream.
Block third-party cookies. Check. Makes sense.
Using a VPN, a virtual private network, can also help. It masks your IP address, which is a key piece of data revealing your location and helping to identify you. It also prevents your internet provider from seeing and potentially selling your browsing habits. Some VPN services even include features to block trackers directly.
So hide my digital trail better.
Okay.
Anything else practical?
Yeah, one simple thing is just to comparison shop actively. If you're looking at something expensive, check the price on your phone versus your laptop. Try it in a private or incognito browser window versus logged in. Check it while connected to Wi-Fi versus cellular. Sometimes you'll see differences that hint personalization might be happening.
So do my own little experiments to sniff it out.
Exactly. It can sometimes reveal if you're being shown different prices based on your context.
All right, so let's try to wrap this up. What's the big picture here on surveillance pricing?
The main takeaway is that it's real, it's happening now, and it's embedded in a lot of the online services we use every day. Shopping, travel, ride-hailing, maybe even other areas.
And fundamentally, it works by using our personal data, often gathered without us really noticing, to show us a price based on what an algorithm guesses we're willing to pay.
That's the core of it. And while some might frame it as just harmless personalization, there are real concerns that tying price to data points that can correlate with income, race, location, or vulnerability could actually worsen discrimination and inequality.
And the consensus seems to be that while we can take steps ourselves, like using VPNs or blocking cookies,
Ultimately, many argue that stronger regulations and more transparency are needed to really address the potential downsides and ensure fairness. The legislative efforts we talked about, especially at the state level in the U.S. and internationally, reflect that push.
this has been really insightful. Definitely gives you a different perspective on online prices.
It certainly makes you look twice at that Buy Now button, doesn't it?
It really does. So maybe a final thought for everyone listening to mull over. If the price you see online isn't the price, but a price calculated just for you based on invisible data trails, what does fair market value even mean anymore in this digital age?
That's a deep question. Definitely something to think about.
Thank you for listening to this FinTalk episode.